Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing, Armando?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Good. Anything exciting happening in life?
Exciting?
Yeah, exciting.
No, nothing.
J'ai compris, monsieur. I totally understand. You know.
The rest of the people. Oh, Robert is here already. And Miss
Yeah.
Now is back.
Yeah, Naomi's here. Well, you know, she doesn't talk to us anymore.
No, she has other more important things to do.
I know.
She can tell she's mute.
Yes, she's muted. She kind of stays that way. You know. Though I wanted to talk to her because I wanted to tell her that I'm trying to learn how to paint like her. So, yeah, she sent in a couple of pieces, you know, over the weekend. Well, actually, I think this morning. And, you know, I like how she plays with color. You know, it's fun. And,
absolutely loves that little piano. Zoe.
Oh.
Yes. And I guess there's a place on it where it teaches her how to play, and she learned Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Good. All right. I guess Bob is in the middle of the conversation.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey, Naomi, how you doing?
Hello.
I had a problem. I needed you because the shoulder. I had a terrible time with the shoulder.
The shoulder? Oh, you mean on the woman at the beach?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I really needed you.
Okay. Well,
In person.
Well, we can, you know, if you want to be here tomorrow, I'm going to show that and we can talk about it. Okay?
Really?
Yeah. And maybe.
Yeah, but I loved when you had the class and you would just come over and do, and it would help.
Yeah. Well.
Someday.
Yeah. Someday. Actually, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about this morning. I have heard, you know, through the powers that be, that the Fulton County Board of Commissioners have kind of decided that they're going to want to try to reopen some of the centers and things.
Yes.
14th of February.
Must be out there.
Only next week.
Yeah.
Normally do that on a regular, does she?
Now, what that means, I have.
She has. I think what she did park that this morning were coyotes.
Coyotes?
Yeah, we have my
Robert, you have to mute yourself.
No, I'm muted. There we go. At any rate.
Don't hold your breath.
Huh?
Don't hold your breath about it.
No. I'm not recommending that anybody hold their breath about it, but you know, that's what I got told, is that, you know, they're thinking about trying to reopen the centers on the 14th of this month, which, okay, it's like, really? Okay. But
that is in a few days.
Yeah, it's not far away. Yeah. Anyway, Naomi, while you're talking to us, are you there?
I'm talking, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I wanted to tell you, you know, I'm trying to learn to paint like you.
Oh, yeah, you're making me laugh.
No,
You are making me laugh.
I'm not joking. No, I'm not joking. No, the thing I find kind of inspirational about you, you know, is I like your playful sort of use of color. You know, I mean, you really, you know, you out of, you know, anybody I've been around, you know, you're totally unafraid of color. You know, and you know, and it shows in your paintings. And I'm trying to up the color game in my paintings as well.
You know what I like about your paintings? When you start the painting, before you get into the realism, when you start, I always tell you stop. That's what I like. When you start it and it's just not done, it's perfect. Do
Yeah.
you ever see that or show that to people?
Well, you know, Naomi, you see, this is the struggle with, you know, well, my struggle in particular is that, you know, I have yet, in many cases, to learn when to stop.
No, you're a perfectionist.
Well, no,
You're very precise.
yeah,
I'm the opposite.
yeah, and it works against me sometimes.
No, you could just stop. When you start, just stop a little.
Yeah.
And that's what I like.
Yeah. Well, if I could learn how to do that, I would probably be much better off. You know, and I've got lots of examples to show to that. You know, so.
No, but what about seeing a painting that you like that is very abstract and just copy it? What about doing that?
Why would I do that?
Because that will get it'll teach you to get looser if you do that.
Oh, I think
If
there's
you
other ways.
copy something that's very loose and you love,
Yeah. Well,
it'll stop you from going on and becoming so realistic. Try it. You'll see.
okay. Well, I mean, in essence, you know, I don't have to copy somebody else's painting. I could always.
No, when you copy it, then you kind of make it your own. But I'm saying that'll loosen you up.
Yeah, but that's what I do every day and every moment of my life. It's like every time I see something, you know, and when I start painting it, even from life, you know, does it ever turn out looking just like the thing? Not really, no. You know, it gets the impression or the idea across. You know, but to your point, it's learning when is enough. And that's probably the hardest thing for many artists to learn. You know, it's like, okay, you know, I've said what I need to say, leave it alone. Yeah. And, you know, and we nitpick it.
No, your paintings are fabulous. It's just that you could try doing it a little different. That's all. Your style is fabulous, but you could try being a little looser. And you say you struggle with it. Just stop. Just stop halfway through. I've seen you do things, and I say, oh, if you would just stop.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it sounds like an easy thing to do.
Because you're a perfectionist. That's one.
Yeah.
That's how you are. I bet your house is just your room where you paint is perfect. Very neat.
No.
You're very neat.
No, not nearly. But you know, it is fairly well organized.
Yes. You're very. When you were young, were you that perfect?
Well, anybody who has ever known me, even just for a little while, knows that I'm far from perfect in anything.
Well, you have perfect. There are things about you that are perfect, and you are very neat and perfect and organized. The opposite of me. That's why I appreciate it.
Yeah, I would put it this way. Okay, I can be methodical. Okay, You know, I definitely have like a step-by-step process. And that's kind of how I get through life. You know, not with just painting, but with anything, really. But
With anything you like that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's terrific.
Well, I can be very anti-spontaneous.
Yes. But you are spontaneous too.
Not that.
Yes.
Often. Yeah. Anyway.
In your class you are.
Oh.
In your class you are.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a situation where, you know, you have to improvise. You know, because you never know what's going to come up. You know, you have a.
Let's put it this way. You're not stiff.
Yeah. Well,
You're not a stiff person.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, you have a plan, and then life happens, and you adapt. Yeah. That's the way that goes. Anyway, we're gonna jump into this, but yeah, I wanted to comment on your paintings that you sent in, and you know, yeah, I keep looking at your work and like, yeah, I need to push color more, you know, and so I'm gonna credit you with that. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So actually, you know, we're gonna look at some pretty challenging stuff today. Okay. I have a whole variety of things for you, right? And literally there will be something here for everyone. We're going to start off with a video about an artist, and Armando will be, you know, thrilled because he shared a poster of a painting, and it was by an artist by the name of William Glackins. Blackens was a American realist and impressionist painter back in the early, well, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s. But, you know, very well-known American artist, you know, excellent artist, and, you know, very much so, you know, akin with Naomi, about really playing with color and really pushing the envelope on color. And so we're going to start there. And then we're going to kind of work our way to, you know, some very unusual stuff. Okay. So everybody ready for that? Everybody got coffee and settled in? Okay.
Do we need anything stronger than coffee?
I don't know, John. Do you? You know, as the day wears on, maybe, you know, there'll be some things that get you to scratch your head, you know, by the class. So, but no, I think you'll be okay. Anyway, I just want to say good morning to everybody, you know. And by the way, before I jump into this, Veronica.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
I looked up lots and lots of work on Raymond Guzman. Okay. And, you know, the thing is, there's not, I mean, in the universe of the internet, there's not really that much out there on him. You know, I found one artist interview, and then I found his website, and then I found, you know, his Facebook page. And that's kind of what I have on him. But I probably got like, you know, 30 or 40, you know, paintings. But he's an interesting character, you know.
Understood. His other occupation, he has a sign business. I'm not sure if he still has that.
Well, yeah, I saw a fair amount of that. He does beautiful sign work.
Yeah, the mostly the town of Hoboken, if people had visited it in the last, I would say 20 to 30 years, is his work, all the signs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
you
he
know, for the,
because he does enamel on metal, for his,
yeah,
and it's all like old style, hand painted, which is really beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. But that carried into his fine art too, because he did a lot of his paintings actually on metal as well.
yeah,
Yeah, what I kind of backed into that by accident because I started looking at the paintings and I went to his website and saw that he was doing enamel on metal. I'm like, okay, well, why would you do that? And then I found out about the sign business, and I mean his signs are literally works of art.
yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, really nice. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know I didn't forget about him. We will be looking at some of his stuff. Okay.
Oh, that would be good. I think the class would probably enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they will.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find some of his, more of his sign stuff so that I can include that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you get to see both sides, of
Yeah.
what he does. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So anyway, we're going to jump into William Glackins here, and we will. Yeah, Rebecca, you got a question? You're muted. You're still
How do you
muted.
spell his,
Oh,
how
what?
do you spell his name? Spell his name?
Oh, Glackins? Oh,
Yes.
Glackens.
Thank you. Thank you.
William Glackins. Okay. Anyway, so away we go. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here. All right. Yeah, we only got like 7 or 8 of these. I got a whole bunch of
Yep.
pages open. All right, let's open this all the way up so we can do a full screen. Because yeah, you're gonna want to see all this stuff. It's good stuff. You'll like it.
Is his nature. He must enjoy life far more than the ordinarily equipped human, for there is a riot of tone in his vision, remarked art critic Arthur Hober in 1910. Hober was referring specifically to William Glackens' 1908 painting Racetrack. But this riot of tone can be seen in many of Glackens' works of that and subsequent years. William Glackens, American realist and impressionist, was an important painter and illustrator in his day. His work influenced numerous other artists of his generation, as well as specific developments in early 20th century American art. He was friends with artists Robert Henry, John Sloan, and Maurice Prendergast, and collector and philanthropist Albert Barnes. He was one of the painters known as the Eight because of a sensation-causing exhibition of his and the work of other artists that year. He was active with the Society of Independent Artists in New York City and helped plan that city's famous Armory Show of 1913. William James Glackens was born on March 13, 1870, at the home of his parents Samuel and Elizabeth Glackens, located at 3214 Sansom Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 15, Glackens enrolled at Central High School, where his artistic training began and met fellow students Sloan and Barnes. In 1892, Glackens attended the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, where Sloan introduced him to Henry, with whom he later shared a studio, and who became one of Glackens' closest friends. In 1893, Glackens, Sloan, and other Academy students began calling themselves the Charcoal Club, and as a group explored subjects in their work other than those offered at the Academy, such as painting a nude model. Glackens also began producing landscapes in the 1890s, when he produced one of his earliest oil paintings, 1893's Philadelphia landscape. In 1894, Glackens' work was displayed publicly for the first time at the Pennsylvania Academy's annual exhibition. He subsequently produced works such as Factory Scene and Autumn Landscape. In the summer of 1895, Glackens, Henry, along with other painters, began nearly a year's travel in Europe. In France, Belgium, and Holland, Glackens studied paintings by Edouard Manet, Claude Monet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Rembrandt, and Frans Hals. His knowledge of their work is evident in paintings such as Circus Parade, On the Quay, In the Luxembourg, and others. Glackens moved to New York City in 1896 and worked as a newspaper illustrator and cartoonist, as did artist friends George Lukes and Everett Shinn. He worked for McClure's magazine in 1897 and subsequently, during the 1898 Spanish-American War, was sent to Cuba to illustrate events for news articles. By 1900, Glackens, Sloane, Shinn, Lukes, and Henry distinguished themselves by depicting realistic scenes of everyday city life that presented people of different classes, including immigrants and beggars, the dirt and unsavory components of city life, and they became known as the ashcan painters. In 1901, Glackens exhibited at the Allen Gallery, New York, with Henry and Sloane, and began to garner positive reviews. That same year, he painted one of his most celebrated works, At Mouquin. By 1906, he produced Tugboat and Lighter, Seated Actress with Mirror, and Dancer in Blue, and began turning away from the subject matter depicted by other ashcan painters. In February 1904, Glackens married Edith Dimmock, and 2 years later, they went to Europe on their honeymoon. Glackens painted a great deal during this time and furthered his study of European painters. The couple returned to New York later in 1906, and in July of 1907, Mrs. Glackens gave birth to a son, Ira. In February 1908, the works of Glackens and 7 other painters were exhibited at the Macbeth Gallery in New York. Sloane, Shinn, Lukes, Henry, Arthur B. Davies, Ernest Lawson, and Maurice Prendergast. The National Academy of Design had excluded some of these painters' works from its annual exhibition, which led to the organization of the 1908 show. Glackens showed 7 paintings, including The Shoppers and Racetrack. The exhibition was a public and critical sensation and success, and traveled to several other cities, including Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, and Newark. At this time, Glackens' work shows the influence of the French Impressionists and Post-Impressionists seen in Europe, such as Monet, Renoir, and Vincent van Gogh. Glackens' riot of tone is most evident in paintings like Wickford Low Tide, and after the success of the 8 and other exhibitions, he became increasingly well known. His schoolmate Barnes had an immense interest in art, and besides purchasing works by Glackens, in 1912, Barnes sent Glackens to Paris to purchase works by Paul Cézanne, Maurice Denis, Vincent van Gogh, Pablo Picasso, Camille Pissarro, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and Alfred Sisley. These works became the basis of the famous Barnes Foundation collection now housed in Philadelphia. Later in 1912, Glackens had his first solo show at the Madison Art Gallery. In 1913, as a charter member of the Association of American Painters and Sculptors, Glackens served as chairman of committee on domestic exhibitions for the International Exhibition of Modern Art, better known as the Armory Show. The avant-garde works of European artists, such as Marcel Duchamp and Paul Cézanne, surprised and outraged the American public at the same time that it made modern American art seem old-fashioned and retardataire to connoisseurs. On December 6, 1913, in New York City, Mrs. Glackens gave birth to a daughter, Lena, and over the next several years, the family spent a lot of time on Long Island, in Connecticut, and near Conway, New Hampshire. Glackins produced a number of paintings in New Hampshire, including Home in New Hampshire and House in Conway. Beginning in 1925, the family traveled extensively in Europe, mostly in France, spending more time abroad than at home. His work demonstrates his interest in capturing scenes of everyday life. Breakfast Port shows Edith, Ira, and Lena taking their morning meal, and Bowler's La Ciotat depicts men at leisure in the south of France. Glackins had often depicted still lifes in his portraits, such as in 1911's Girl with Green Apple. In the late 1920s and the 1930s, he turned more of his attention to still life painting. When Glackins was in his 60s, his health had declined, which may have contributed to his interest in studio pieces and still lifes. Many of these 1930s works depict flowers, as in Garden Chair, and flowers in a Camper picture. The small untitled painting, which is known as Still Life with Paint Tubes, is perhaps William's last work. He died on May 22, 1938, the year the Whitney Museum of American Art, New York, organized a memorial exhibition of his work, which opened that December. Ira Glackins inherited many of his father's works, and before Ira's death in 1990, he bequeathed nearly all of them to what is now Nova Southeastern University Art Museum, Fort Lauderdale. With his wife, he also founded the Simpson Foundation, which has subsequently given hundreds of Glackins' paintings, drawings, photographs, and sketchbooks to the museum, which is now the largest repository of work by Glackins in the world. The museum welcomes scholars and the general public to the museum, and by appointment to its newly established Glackins Research Center, founded in part with the generous support of the Simpson Foundation, to enjoy and study its important art and archival collections of Glackins' work. In 2014, NSU Art Museum organized a major retrospective of Glackins' art, the first in 30 years. The following describes the exhibition and provides glimpses of it at each venue.
to stop this just for a second because I want you to look at the large painting, right? And then next to it is a small study.
Oh.
And, you know, that was not the, you know, let's see, go back just a little bit. Yeah, but right there. Right there. Okay. So you see, he has a finished painting, but these are kind of looser, like studies that he's done, you know, before he went in to do the final painting. And so these are, you know, preliminary thoughts. My guess is, you know, he may have done more than just two. You know, probably somewhere in the number of 8 to 10. You know, just little variations playing with color and different ideas before he got in to actually doing, you know, the final painting itself. And, you know, I talked to you guys a lot about, you know, doing kind of preparation, you know, do these little studies. You don't have to do them very large. If you notice, these are probably half scale to the final piece. But, you know, even if you did, you know, something quarter, you know, or, you know, like, you know, 20% the size, just as a little colored thumbnail sketch, and you did several of them, you could resolve a lot of issues and problems, you know, in your final painting, you know, at that stage. And that way have a better idea of what you're going to do, you know, when you get into the final piece, which frees you up, you know, in many ways. So just wanted to point that out. So what you guys think of William Glackins?
Interesting.
Anybody ever hear of him?
No,
I have. I love his work, though.
I had not. He was definitely not afraid to use color.
No, he was not. That's why he was kind of labeled, you know, the American version of Renoir. You know, because they both use color in very much so the same way. Now, interestingly enough, okay, if you look in the collection of his paintings, he had a nude figure, right? That was kind of laying out, you know, across, you know, like a couch. And if you look at that, that's almost a direct copy of Matisse's Odelay. And the difference being, you know, that well, in Odelay there was a second figure, a maid, and there was nothing covered. You know, it was just the full nude, which was very shocking to the, you know, Parisian community, you know, at the time. But in Blackens' case, what did he do? You know, he laid a napkin or a doily across, you know, her pubic region, right? Anybody have a clue as to why he would do that?
American public wasn't ready for nudes.
Well, the American public, you have to remember, okay, this was at the end or really, yeah, it was just at the close of the Victorian age, okay, when he painted that. And so, an immodest nude like that would have caused public outrage, So yes, he definitely toned it down. He knew, his audience, and and basically, tried to stay within, the social norms of the time. So, but anybody got any other thoughts about Blackens?
Well, what I noticed when you stopped the piece and was showing to the right of the two smaller versions of the picture on the left,
Right.
The picture on the right, he had one smaller version of it, and that was in the main. There were two ladies sitting on the one to the right was in yellow. The one in the left in the smaller version was purple, the complete opposite, but he turned it to the large one to the orange, and it was so much better because it was, I don't know, more readable to me with the orange instead of the purple, which was the opposite color.
Yeah, because she was almost like in that blue or blue violet, she was almost this shadowy figure in the study.
Right.
And then when he got to the final, he went, the totally
Terrified.
opposite direction.
Made it a lot more cohesive. I don't know. It just was more. I liked it more.
Oh yeah. No, the final by all means was, much stronger.
Yeah.
But you see, and that's the value of doing these preliminary studies, is that you work these things out. You look at them and go, okay, so what's working about this, what's not, and then you go to the next step, and so, and he may, as I said, they only showed the one, but he may have 7 or 8 others that they didn't hang next to it, but that's for most painters, okay, I'm only speaking of painters, but it's true in sculptors as well, and printmakers. What you're seeing in the final work is like the tip of the iceberg, because before you get to that final piece, there are versions and studies, and it's a process.
They very rarely show the process. That was what I thought was really interesting. That most of the displays have just the finished product, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, and you see, that is one positive thing that I think is happening in museums and institutions, is that they're now, I think, a lot more conscientious about showing, sort of the studies and a lot of the little sketches and preliminary drawings, so that the public begins to understand that, this guy didn't just, sit down at the easel one day and whip this out in a couple of hours. This was not, this is easy. I'm just going to sit down and paint, which is, to a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the process of creating anything, really. That's what they think. I mean, how much thought do you give to that chair in your dining room, right? And, if you really think about that, and, it could be applied to anything that we have in our life, okay? But I'm just going to use a chair because most people don't think of a chair as a piece of art. But the fact is, it is, and not only one person, but literally generations of people have sat down and redesigned chairs and thought about them. And each successive generation has learned what works, and what makes a good, stable chair, before you could sit down and design one and actually build one and put it together, right? Well, the same thing is true with painters, you know? I mean, Glackins was a talented artist, you know, but he relied on generations of other artists before him that he studied and looked at, you know, and, you know, plus his circle of friends, you know, which were no slouches, you know, Maurice Pendergast, you know, and all the rest of them. You know, they were all, you know, wonderful painters all on their own. And we'll look at, you know, just about all of them. A lot of the work of those artists that they were talking about ended up being collected, you know, by this one particular individual. And the collection is housed in Philadelphia. It's called the Barnes Collection. And it's probably one of the best and most extensive collections of Impressionist paintings anywhere in the world. Okay, and that's both American and European
Did you
Impressionist.
say Barnes collection? Did you say
Yep.
Charles Barnes, B-A-R-N-E-S?
Yeah, Barnes, I think. Yeah, it could be ES,
Yes.
but it's in Philadelphia, and you know, I went there maybe 30 years ago and saw that collection, and you know, it's kind of akin to going to like the booth. You know, there's so much work there, you can't see it all. It's just endless. You know, I mean, you could literally spend weeks, you know, just going through the collection, you know, looking at even what they've got displayed. And they have way more work in the archives than they even do on the walls. So, you know, but yeah, if you ever get a chance to get to Philadelphia, and I guess, well, you know, I think the Barnes collection is still in Philadelphia. I think there was some talk at one point of moving it to New York. I'll have to go check on that and see if whether it ever got moved.
Barnes Foundation instead of the Barnes Collection? Is it not the?
Yeah, it's the museum itself is called the Barnes Collection.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sure there is a foundation backing it. You know, they got to get money from somewhere. So
yeah.
Anyway,
Charles, I had a question.
Yeah.
Who was it that sent him to Europe to do a lot of collections of the Impressionists?
That was Barnes.
Oh, Barnes, the Barnes we're just talking about.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was a schoolmate and friend of his. You know, they had gone to, you know, the, I want to say the Philadelphia Academy together. You know, and Barnes was an avid art collector. You know,
Okay.
I think he decided, you know, somewhere along the line that, you know, well, there's a lot of people out here doing this much better than I am. And he just happened to come from a fairly well-to-do family. And he just decided to be more of a patron and a collector than an actual artist. You know, and thank God for him, because I mean,
Yeah.
he put, you know, an amazing amount, you know, and beautiful collection together.
So the things he collected is in the Barnes collection.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, like I said, it's probably one of the largest collections of Impressionists, both American and European Impressionism, of any collection in the world.
Hmm.
You know, it's pretty extensive. So, anyway, we're going to go from there, and we're going to get into, you know, a whole nother thing. Let's see, where is she? No, we don't want to look at Weiwei right now. There's the Facebook. Oh, yes. Okay, here it is. All right, now this is actually posted I can only find the video posted on Facebook, of all places. But, you know, it's, let's see how we do here.
So Rob,
Okay. I don't know that I can even do this full screen, which is bothersome, to say the least. Oh, here it is. Okay. That's what I was looking at. There we go. All right, so this is about Sophie Troiper Arp.
Is far from a household name. The way that she worked across disciplines and genres and creative roles are a real positive now, but it means that in the past it was hard to say, oh, who is Sophie Troiper Arp? My name is Anne Umlin. I'm a senior curator in the Department of Painting and Sculpture here at the Museum of Modern Art, and I am one of the 4 co-curators of the exhibition, Sophie Troiper Arp, Living Abstraction. For Sophie Troiper Arp, abstraction was always connected to an everyday lived reality. She was making objects or designs for things to be handled, touched, and manipulated. She's creating spaces for people to move about in. When she began her career, it was with the intent of making a name for herself as an applied artist and as a craftsperson. But what happens is that she has the realization that this elemental structure of her textile grids could be used to create a new language of abstraction. You can watch her take those basic vertical and horizontals and those very bright colors, and if you just shift right to the work to the right, you can see how the grid here is now translated and cut out colored paper elements, or here on this wall, you can watch her sort of explode the grid right into this much more dynamic, animated type of composition and form with all these little individual tessellated squares. And then we can watch as she translates these same basic shapes from mural painting to a cardboard relief to stained glass. During these same years in Zurich, Sophie Troiper Arp is teaching at the local trade school. She teaches textile and embroidery design, and she encourages her students to go back to the very basics. It's almost as though saying, let's take everything apart so we can start over again.
If you want to practice designing, you might try the following. Draw a square and try to divide it in the most natural and simple way, with an eye to using the forms or dividing lines as decorations. Then, as a further exercise, make somewhat more complicated divisions and fill in the various fields with 2 or 3 pure colors. You might start with a line. Attempt to discover what expression you can obtain by means of different wavy or zigzag lines.
In 1915, Sophie Troiper Arp meets an artist and a poet named Hans Arp, and he introduces her to a number of members of the Dada group. And she performs at their events and is very much a participant. Well, Dada, I think, set out to be undefinable, raucous performances and nonsense poetry readings and all the rest. But fundamentally, it was an anti-bourgeois movement that protested what they saw as the culture of rationality that had led to the unprecedented devastation and carnage of World War I. Here, we're just looking at some of the puppets that Troiper Arp created for the puppet play King Stag in 1918. Prior to this, within the sort of folk tradition of puppet making, the goal was to make your marionettes as lifelike as possible. And Sophie Troiper Arp takes a very different approach, reimagining the human body not made up of flesh and blood and bone, but of these elementary geometric components. She leaves the way that they're put together visible so that you see the joints. When she gets to Paris and to France, that sort of marks another major shift in her practice. For the first time during her mature career, she was freed from her teaching obligations, and she was able to devote more time to her fine arts practice. Her textile grid structure, in a way, is underground, but still everything is very clearly structured, right, along horizontal and vertical axes by introducing subtle irregularities, right? Just the way like this little rectangle doesn't quite touch that circle. Those little tiny irregularities and decisions add up to a particularly dynamic form of composition. This wall is just interesting to look at because you can see like that same shape, this almost half of an amphora shape. She cuts it in half, she moves it around, she turns it upside down. She says, talk, positive and negatives come in and out of focus. And again, that's a way of just like watching her language kind of evolve. In June of 1940, Troiper Arp and her husband flee their home in Clamart, just outside Paris, days before the Germans march in. And there, her work takes another shift, and she begins to make these absolutely lyrical color pencil drawings. This is in part dictated by her circumstances, by the scarcity of art supplies, and that she's in large part during this period making works on the move. For the first time, you see the grid's just gone. And it's almost as though that rational structure in the face of the chaos of World War II and Troiper Arp's displacement just wasn't adequate. And she begins to make these meandering line drawings that are remarkably free in the way that they look or the movement that they evoke, but that are as precisely planned as everything else that you've seen in this show. She outlines her lines and she films them in with countless little velvety marks. We know from her letters, she worries every day about how to find food. She spends hours, she says, standing on line, like waiting for butter. And then at the same time, like in the same sentence, she says, and then I made 6 drawings. It's a radical thing, I think, to continue to find joy in the creative act when you're worrying about how you're going to have food on the table when you're living in isolation and in exile.
In our complicated times, I have frequently asked myself why we do such embroideries at all, when there are so many more practical and especially more necessary things to do. I believe the urge to make the things we own more beautiful is a deep and primal one. Only when we go into ourselves and attempt to be entirely true to ourselves will we succeed in making things of value, living things, and in this way help to develop a new style that is fitting for us.
In 1943, just a few days shy of her 54th birthday, Sophie Troiper Arp died accidentally of carbon monoxide poisoning. She went to the home of a friend of theirs, Max Bill, and used a guest room that had a wood-burning stove, and she didn't realize that the flue was closed, and so never woke up again. This gallery contains on the wall behind me the last works that she made. If you look at those drawings, you might notice that they look like nothing you've seen, and so really the exhibition ends as much as anything else with new directions and with the thought of, had Sophie Troiper Arp lived, like just imagine. Sophie Troiper Arp is far from a household.
Okay. Any thoughts about that?
Interesting. At first I didn't really care for it too much, but then it got better. It got more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, when you begin to get, a little insight into who these people are and to kind of their journey or their path, and how they arrived at where they did. Yeah, you can begin to kind of empathize with them, and their work. Because it's.
I thought that her needlework was remarkable because I've done some of that yarn stitch thing, and it is very time consuming, but I loved her use of color, and the puppets were so whimsical. I really enjoyed them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she was a remarkable, artist. And when you look at the range of work and the different media that she used, it's pretty incredible. She didn't just play with paint. She painted, she did three-dimensional sculptural things. Remember, though, that from her very beginning, she studied what is commonly referred to as applied art. Okay. Applied art can be many different things, from textile design, pottery, something useful, right? It's not just a pretty thing to hang on the wall. It's something that people are going to live with, that they're going to wear or handle, and that was, that was her emphasis, from the very beginning. And so, she ended up, doing, some really incredible work. And considering, the fact of what was going on, because remember, that she sort of began developing her art really kind of at the end of World War One, and World War One had happened, and then you had an art movement called the Dadaist, or the Dada movement, and as the narrator pointed out, it was kind of this backlash of it's like, okay, so why is everybody trying to get back to quote unquote normal life, and they just kind of went off the deep end, and it was kind of this very strange, bizarre stuff, because it was a reaction because people wanted to see change. They realized the things that had created that environment, and they wanted to kind of create a new world, something where that couldn't happen again. And that's kind of what the Dadaist art movement was, sort of the underlying theme there. So, and we'll talk more about that art movement at a later date. But if you're curious, go take a look and do a little research on some of the artists out there who were involved in that.
You say that the artist, the Dada movement, was that the artist you say between World War One and World War II?
It started right after World War One, and it went really, I think, through about the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s. Okay, but
so they weren't discouraged. They're making a better world after during World War II.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, no, they kept on trying to get the world in general, to change direction, and to kind of think about a new way of of forming a society, where you wouldn't have those conflicts and things like that, and have all the turmoil and political divide. But yeah, it Yeah, I think it went through really about the 1950s. Was kind of like the last gasp of it. But you know, like a lot of art movements, it didn't really ever end, because the fact is, you know, from that, you know, you had the spinoff of like the Bauhaus, you know, which was you know, like post World War I as well. You know, the Stil, okay, which was in Austria, and you know, we had Klimt and you know, all those guys. You know, there was this, you know, many reactions to World War I. You know, and a lot of different art movements, you know, sort of address, you know, that issue, and you got this flourishing of decorative art, you know, including a movement called Art Deco, right? You know, Art Deco. Yeah, Art Deco actually happened after World War One, right? And was probably one of the major art movements in this country. You know, you had all of these lavish movie theaters, you know, being built, you know, in the 1920s, right, all the way through like about the 1930s, 1940s. Well, I guess it kind of ended, yeah, really in about the 30s, because when the stock market crashed, you know, as my design teacher, John Morgan, said, you know, and this is his quote: "No money, no deco." You know, because when the stock market crashed, you know, all the money dried up, and designers had to kind of rethink. It's like, okay, you know, how are we going to design these buildings and cars and everything else? We can't rely on elaborate decoration, you know. And so, you know, you got other art movements that spun off of that, you know, to answer those questions, you know, such as the modern movement. And we'll talk about more stuff like that. All right. Anybody else got anything?
So what movement are we in now?
Good question. We don't know. And you won't know. You know, you won't know. You know, you won't know the answer to that question for another 50 to 100 years. Yeah.
I think right now we have crazy people movement.
Well, like every time, you know, I mean, anytime in history, there are different people doing different things. And what is going to end up, you know, basically being noticed and I guess made valid, you know, for the time that we're going through, you know, we really don't know. What I can tell you is, at least in this country, there's a very strong movement back toward representational art, and that's been going on really since the 1970s. Okay. Where that will end up at, we don't know, but it seems to be gaining momentum. And, you know, and museums, you know, they're basically sucking up any kind of abstract art that they can find now, because it, you know, they're putting that in their collection to define a period of time. But they're also beginning to, you know, collect, you know, more representational, you know, contemporary representational art. So yeah, it's definitely shifting, you know.
No, contemporary art is in itself that started in the 70s, and it's very, you know, everything is kind of clean and I guess just it's kind of clean lines and kind of like just out there. So if we're moving into more realism, is, you know, some more toward to traditional again. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, the pendulum swinging back, you know, toward, you know, recognizable imagery.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like any kind of art movement, you know, something becomes dominant. The next group of artists, you know, kind of revolt against that and go the opposite way. And so, you know, the natural answer to abstraction is that, you know, you get more realism. So, and so that's kind of what's happening now, is that more artists are beginning to do more representational work. But, you know, the fact is, you know, there's people out there doing all kinds of things. And I mean, you know, it's such a wide spectrum. That's why, you know, you won't really realize, or you won't really know, like I said, you know, till none of us are here, you know, as to what this time will be defined as, because we won't be the ones defining it. You know, it'll be, you know, people 50 to 100 years from now who are looking back at and seeing what was going on now, because they'll have a broader, you know, perspective of, you know, what was being created than we do.
Charles, I've got a question on that line. With the COVID, you know, this has certainly been tough on all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And to look back at the Spanish flu and what was going on in 1917 to about 1920, I'm sure had a big impact. Were there any art-related items that you can draw parallels to and reactions to those different epidemics?
Yeah, look at the whole abstract art movement, you know, and Pablo Picasso and things like that. You know, I mean, he and other artists, you know, spoke directly to, you know, the that epidemic. You know, there were a lot of American artists who did as well. You know,
Sure,
like Giorgio. Yes, Armando.
In Picasso, remember that also the Spanish Revolution make influence on him too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Guernica was the piece that, you know, he's probably best known for, you know, which was all about, you know, the Spanish Revolution. So, but yeah, you know, tumultuous times and historic events like the one that we're living through right now is definitely going to spin off some reactions from, you know, artists, you know, because it's something that, you know, society in general will kind of need to work through and talk about and figure out, you know, for themselves over time. So, and that's what creative and, you know, artistic people do.
Yeah, on another point there, back to the artist, is it Troiper Arp? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Yeah, with her puppets, which were quite playful and almost, reverting back to a childhood like fantasy with moving objects.
Right.
And that they were simple and yet very playful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, you know, they wanted, you know, she wanted to make those figures so extreme and so different from, you know, an anatomically correct human body. Again, so that, you know, people viewing the performance, you know, they don't stick a lot of labels onto those characters, you know, because it's not something that they would easily recognize. And so it keeps them open, you know, during the performance about, you know, who these characters are, you know, to learn about them, you know, through the process.
So there were actual, I don't know, plays, puppet shows that they did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they did actual live. You know,
Do they still do some of that today?
I'm sure they do somewhere. You know, exactly where, and you know, you know, you've got the Center for Puppetry Arts right here in Atlanta.
Yes, yes, yes. Adult stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yes, no, yeah, for adults, yes.
well,
That's right, right.
adults and children. You know,
Yes,
I mean, I haven't heard anything recently, but you know, maybe 10 years ago,
okay.
you know, they were open to the public and they were giving, you know, performances of not just classical, you know, puppetry plays, but you know, they had contemporary people who were writing, you know, stories and things like that, and creating puppets, you know, for those performances.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, yeah, you know, that's another art form all into itself, and you know, really combines a lot of different disciplines. You know, but it's still very much so alive, and you know, people still
look at the Muppets.
Yeah, Muppet. Yeah, Jim Henson. Anyhow, we got, how are we doing time-wise?
About 11:15.
Yeah, okay.
40 minutes.
Yeah, so we're gonna get at least one more in, maybe two, because I got some things that will probably get you to scratch your head just a little bit more.
We like those.
Yeah, you know. So,
The problem is at my age, nothing surprised me.
Nothing surprises you? Okay, all right. Well, let's take a look at this guy and see. I got to get these out of the way.
Kim Simpson.
Mm-hmm. Here he is. Yeah. Okay.
Swedish, Norwegian.
Yeah, Finnish, I believe. Interesting stuff, though.
Tell me, yeah.
So now we are in Discuss Village. This is the home of the consumer brand company Discuss. So international
Never heard
brand.
of those.
He's from Finland.
Here in this village in 1640 something. And production was here going until I think late 80s. Actually, where my studio is, so here they have been making axes and knives and things like that. Nowadays it's renovated for art studio. This village is quite a historically special place in Finland. There isn't any other place that looks like this really here in the whole country. I've been here with my wife 5 years ago. Before that, we lived in a residency in the countryside, and before that, I had been living in the city. But now this kind of countryside life somehow feels very good. So I grew up in the city of Espoo. It's a neighboring city to our capital, Helsinki. It's kind of a suburban city to Helsinki. And originally I wanted to be a professional soccer player. And until I was 13, that was my only option. But then I realized that I'm actually really talented in drawing, and I started to draw every day and practice soccer every day, and they were going together. But when I was 16, then I realized I'm going to stop this soccer playing, that I'm not fast enough. I won't be a real top player in the world. So then I decided I'm going to concentrate all my efforts on art. So after high school, I wanted to apply to the Fine Art Academy to study painting, but I for some reason I missed the application deadline, and then I decided that for maybe 1 year I could study something else before applying again. So for fun, I applied to the ceramic and glass department at the design school in Helsinki. And I got accepted to the school. And pretty soon I realized that this three-dimensional like sculpting, that's more natural for me than painting two-dimensional work. And after that, I haven't really painted a single painting. After graduation from the university, I went to live working in Canada. In Toronto, I was working in an artist residency for 3 years there doing my art, sculpting, and then I had the exhibition in Finland. It was in 2003, Ruby Gallery, and I was chosen the Emerging Artist of the Year. It's quite important art award in Finland. I have a studio also in the old ceramic factory in Helsinki called Arabia. So there has been this art department in the top floor of the ninth floor factory since the 30s. And there has been the top Finnish ceramic artists and designers been working there since then. And there I was using the factory glazes, and they needed to be fire tight. So if I glaze my work, then I glaze them with the Arabia factory glazes. I've always wanted to combine glass and ceramic, and so I made my first human figure. I came up with this idea of a girl spitting a glass spit. When I was living in Canada, I had found that some artists glass artists were using this flocking technique on their glass pieces, glass sculptures, and I got kind of interested in this tool. But then it took me until 2012, and I decided I'm gonna buy this flocking tool. With this flocking, you get this kind of a velvety surface object, nylon fiber. So electrostatically transfer this nylon fiber on the surface of the object. So I bought this tool, and I bought many kind of different colors of fibers. And I was doing tests, but nothing really worked. And then I had this sculpture that I didn't like so much, and I had been painted it black. And then I decided I had this horrible looking yellow nylon fiber, neon yellow nylon fiber, and I was like, what I'm going to do with this? So I put it on the black sculpture. And suddenly this surface became this kind of a vibrant, mossy texture on it, and look on it. And sometime then I realized that this is perfect for my figures. The guy is kind of a fairy tale troll figures. And at that time I already had moved to Fiskars, and there's a lot of forest here with beautiful old trees, some like many 100-year-old trees with some very, very beautiful moss on them. So all this inspired me to start to make these moss people sculptures. In my mind, I feel that the moss people, the kids, they are from the future, living in the future. I don't know exactly what year, but maybe shall we say 100 years from here. And there is like there has happened something, and then they are kind of by themselves. They have to take care of themselves, and that's why and also they have sometimes this kind of they're carrying some random objects that for us it's no real meaning. So they have made some meaning objects. But then it's important. It's a kind of a relic from ancient times that is our time, Asian for them. So here I'm working on a sculpture of a girl. It's going to be a monster eating a two-headed rabbit. So there is an example of this, this exhibition actually. It's another version. So I put in like the finishing touch. Now this head part has to dry a little bit. I think it's now enough dry, and I'm going to put some more clay here. Let it dry a little bit, and then I put the hair, and I start to finish the eyes and all that. The face. Then it's gonna dry, and then fire. And then the last thing, I'm gonna put the nylon fiber blocking on those objects. Takes me about maybe a month to finish a sculpture.
So what did you guys think of that?
I liked it. What is this flocking he's doing?
It's yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the process is, but yeah, there was some kind of tool, that he came across, and it had an industrial application. But artists were beginning to use it and play with it, and
Looks like it's very toxic because he was all suited up.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, it's nylon, you're basically taking like nylon fiber and shooting it into the air, at this sculpture. And then somehow he's electrostatically charging the sculpture so that the fiber is attracted to it and sticks to it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'd like to find out more about that.
Yeah.
I like.
That'll probably be Bob's next project.
Oh, yeah. You want to take that on and start soft, fuzzy sculptures.
Oh, that would be cute.
Yeah, you could, instead of painting your dog, you could do a little, well, you can make it any color. You can make a little
right.
Dog. So
there you go.
Do a
Make it
fuzzy
soft enough
dog
like a tenant.
Yeah, I loved how his life evolved from soccer to art. I just love how he did that transition.
Yeah.
I felt very comfortable and at peace with it.
Yeah, I mean, he, in listening to kind of his story about, how he evolved, a lot of people don't really think much about, how do artists actually survive? How do you get to the point, how do you keep doing your art long enough so that you can get noticed, maybe get into a museum or something like that, get a little bit of exposure, right? As someone I once knew, said, honey, you can die from exposure. Yeah. She was right. At any rate.
But I think that's true of most artists. Would you think, Charles, that they're always developing, learning new things, seeing what's developed, working on, and trying to enhance other people's work, and you say achieve something that'll be the standard, recognizable, make you famous.
And different enough that people will take notice. And I mean, he was working as a sculptor, obviously, he was doing some kind of work and selling work for galleries and various things. But, he did a lot of traveling. He lived a lot of different places. doing these artist residencies. And so, he would be working like in part of Canada, for a couple of years. And the way that residencies work with artists is that there are, institutions that you can get a grant and a residency to go live in a community. And these are usually, well, they vary. Sometimes they're in big cities. Sometimes they're in little rural communities in the middle of nowhere. But the reason that they have an artist in residence is that they want them interacting with the community, and particularly, with young children and things growing up, so they can see that there's a possibility outside of what's immediately available to them, within their community, that there's a bigger world out there. And,
you won't make money with me.
Pardon?
You will not make money with me. I don't care about his art.
Well, a lot of these artists don't make a lot of money. Okay, when you're doing residency programs and things like that, you basically, your job is to open up the studio every day, to interact with the public, to put on talks and exhibitions, things like that. Most of the talks and exhibitions, you're going to be talking to, classes, in grade school, kindergarten, high school, sometimes you'll do adult presentations, but what that does is that exposes those young children, to the possibility that if you're a creative person, you could actually live as an artist. You don't have to become a plumber, you don't have to become a carpenter, those are great, those are great trades and things. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But there are other things possible.
I'm glad that he thought he could do more than just play soccer, that he had reached the heights in soccer. And now the man's search for meaning. He know that his life was not going to be complete. They put a period after soccer because he felt he wanted to do a lot more with his life, and he did. We can see it now. So
yeah,
I applaud him for doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, he's still relatively, quote unquote, a young man,
Yes.
out there working, and now he's raising a family, and, and so, there, if he doesn't, maybe his work doesn't make it into like all the major museums in the world, right? But maybe one of his children being influenced, looking at dad or mom working as a creative person, they decide to do something, and, maybe they do. A lot of these things, turn out to be generational. Look at the Wyeths, right?
Yeah.
There was N.C. Wyeth, and, he made a very practical living, as an illustrator, right? It was a great living, nothing wrong with it. But, the fact that he was an illustrator, he passed, those skills and things on to his son, Andrew, right? And Andrew became probably one of the preeminent American artists, very iconic of American art for that period of time. And then, of course, Andrew being a well-known artist and, having connections and things like that, to the art world, had a son by the name of Jamie. And Jamie Wyeth is out there right now, making art, as a full-time artist and being collected in, museums and things like that are, keeping an eye on him because of the legacy, that's been passed on. So,
yeah. I especially enjoyed that he's made a book, that he's talking about these fantastical creatures out in maybe the woods, the wilds. It's almost like carrying on the whole Norse mythology,
right?
With out in the forest and the trees and whatever is out there. Other spiritual characters, the elves, the whatever.
Yeah, well, you begin to look at, who he is as a person, and, the culture he was raised in, is definitely a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the influences, you know, from where he came from. You know, if he had been like somebody like the person we're going to look at next, you know, who was Chinese, it would be a totally different mythology. See, and a totally different, you know, source. So,
But I think that particular segment we just looked at, they did pick up that he was living amongst 100-year-old trees, and you know, so it was a very old environment. And you got
With
the.
moss.
I'm sorry.
Is it covered with moss?
And covered with moss. Yeah, that's got to be influential on his picking of the materials to cover his characters in.
yeah. Well, you could tell he was suffering a lot. You know, I mean, he was having a tough life. I mean, you know, he lives in a village in Finland where there was basically from the mid 1600s, you know, they were making, you know, knives and axes and things, and became Fisker. You know,
Fiskars, yeah.
Yeah. You know, big international.
Actually, yeah, fisk is actually a term, at least in the Sweden, for fish. So I'm wondering if they didn't first start using things to cut fish.
Maybe.
And then fiskars, you know, kind of developed from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the whole story behind that. But I have at least 3 or 4 pair of those orange scissors around here. At least.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I saw the pruners look like some pruners I had.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, it's all
they're good scissors.
Something we're all familiar with, right? So, okay. Well, all right. So here's the last thing I'm going to share with you. I had one more thing, but we're not going to have time for it. So we're going to go with another artist. And the thing I want you to kind of be thinking about, all right, as you're watching this, you watched one artist, right, the sculptor, and he seems to be kind of working more or less in a bubble, you know, kind of isolated, you know, a single artist, you know, making his stuff, right? And I want you to compare it to the artist that we're going to look at now, and how this artist actually interacts with the world around him and the community, and involves them in the process of making his art. Okay, and it's a very different thing. So. Let me open that up a bit.
Wait.
Yep.
Guzman, that's Hispanic.
Yeah. Ai Weiwei is his
Ai Weiwei.
Yes. And let's do full screen. And you guys, you know, you're going to be scratching your heads a little bit, but just hang in there.
Start.
Is that you, Charles?
Now.
And first, people would have impressions those are real sunflower seeds.
No.
Fake seeds, it takes them a while to adjust their mind. They would always say, "Oh, is that possible?" Then they would pick up a few. Some even want to clean them to try. I always think art is a tool to really set up to create a basic structure which can be open to possibilities. Is the most interesting part in my work. And I want people who doesn't have to understand art to understand what I'm doing. So
Anyways, studio. Oh. Products.
Normally, the porcelain production requires around 30 stages, and you cannot really escape from it.
How do you like that high-end technology there? A water-driven wheel, you know, to get these hammers to pound that material.
What kind of machine is that?
Handmade.
Charles, but I have been looking online. He also has some good paintings.
Yeah.
The sunflower seeds are making a town called Jindejian. It's about 1,000 kilometers from Beijing. The whole town is making porcelains for the emperor's court. It's for generations people trying to refine a shape of a bowl or vase, and those are a very fixed language. We have been working there for maybe 5-6 years to trying to find out what is possibility to employ this technique to modern contemporary language. Because the quantity, it takes involved 1,600 people and more in this town. So that means almost everybody knows somebody's making these sunflower seeds. Even the taxi drivers would talk about it, but nobody really understands. If you tell them just for exhibition, nobody understands why you have to accept this. $50块钱一个了。块一个，700-350，300吧，260这些算200。我这个200不行的，这正宗文革的。哎呦，你。Yeah, it's very funny position. You realize people started telling you that, oh, he's the one making sunflower seeds, and we really love your work. And can you give us more work?
Stand this one.
Let's do. Okay, let me get out of here.
Okay.
The actual production is very much like in the old time. You can have a group of people working together, people, different people taking different procedures. When come to the painting procedure, you need most people because every side take about 3 to 4 strokes. Or skillful ones take 3 strokes, and some may take 4 or 5. It can be also because it's really the old tradition people produce at home. You can work for 1 hour, then you have to feed your child, then you have to cook for your husband, maybe go out to buy vegetable, then work for another half hour waiting for food to be cooked. It's really good.
也是高，是我们最近爆发子的人年龄最大的一个。
大姐多大年龄了？
毛呗，60多岁。
哦，还好，比我大一点点。
大一点点，像吧。
50多了嘛。做了多少年了？
我啊，30多年。10年底了做30多年。
才会啊。
才会。
到过毛泽东吧？
毛泽东还在的时候，我就参加工作，没有挂过。
哦，不是什么人都能画。In the political area, you can see all the paintings always have sunflower seeds. Whenever Chairman Mao come out, there's sunflowers around him. That means Chairman Mao is the sun, and those all the ordinary peoples who is loyal to the party is the sunflowers. So sunflowers support the whole revolution, spiritually and material-wise.
谢谢你放了很多瓜子。
啊，不用谢，我也赚钱了。
放了有多少粒啊？
我啊，多少粒呀？反正放了两三千多块钱吧。
They're all nice. So you feel, oh, you have to make some more or make some other kind of projects which can meet their need. I think the quantity we made for Tate is already beyond imagination, and it's going to be some kind of myth for the history of this town.
Okay then.
You lost me on this one. I want to know, did they take the original sunflower seed and coat it with something, paint it, and then heat it to keep the, what is it there? How does that work? I lost it.
Okay.
I didn't keep up.
He walked you through the whole process.
Okay.
So you saw the final exhibition, and now keep in mind, this was presented at the Tate Gallery in London, England. Okay. Now, Weiwei is a Chinese artist. He's also a human rights activist and things. But what he was doing is each, they had to make molds to make porcelain castings of a sunflower seed. And so he took you through. That's right. Yeah. None of these were real sunflower seeds. They were all porcelain.
Oh, all right, now I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they had to make literally millions of them.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes.
That was my question. How you gonna put those seed in the oven?
You see, and he kind of talked about that in the beginning, is that, people walk into that room and they don't realize that these are not real sunflower seeds, that these are actually pieces of ceramic. And that one of them has been cast. And, if you've ever worked with clay or anything like that, right? You take it out of the mold, and after you take it out of the mold, you got to clean up the edges and everything. So there's a lot of handwork involved in just making one, okay? And literally they made millions of them, okay?
And it was very small.
So this was just a project.
Yeah.
This was a project.
Yeah, this is one piece of what we would call conceptual art, okay?
Conceptual art.
Conceptual art, okay?
To take forever to make those things.
Say what?
Take a lot of time.
Yes, yeah. We're talking, this was a several year long process. You know, it didn't happen like overnight. Okay. You know, he had kind of come up with this idea. Okay. And this is what I want to do. And then they found funding for it. Okay. Now, here's the thing, and this is what the thing I wanted you to kind of see is that, okay, he had this idea, the concept, right? And his idea, again, kind of goes back to his roots. You know, he comes from communist China, you know, right? And understanding the history of communist China and the you know, Cultural Revolution there through Mao, right?
Right.
And the symbol, you know, the symbol, you know, when you look at it like, you know, there's a lot of iconography around Mao Zedong, and they use the sunflower seed, right? And the sunflower seed was basically representative of the people who were following Mao. See, millions of people who supported the Cultural Revolution, right? See, that's why he's using the sunflower seed, you know, as a symbol. And it kind of represents, you know, that mass of people, you know, with that ideology, more or less.
Now, who is Ray Guzman?
Pardon?
Who is Ray Guzman? Again, when you start on the top, that name show out, Ray Guzman.
Yeah, okay, that's somebody we're going to talk about. You know, Veronica had, you know, asked that I look at some of his art and maybe present it to the class. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're not
I
going
thought that this guy was Ray Guzman. I said, but
No.
Guzman is a Hispanic name.
Yeah, I don't know why you got that idea, but no, he has nothing to do with Ray Guzman. Okay. But yeah, we will be talking about Ray in the future. All right. But getting back to this, okay, so you see him as an artist, and then somebody had to make all those sunflower seeds, right?
Yeah.
And you had this village that used to make porcelain for the old regime, you know, before Mao, you know, there was an emperor, right? Okay. And they basically hired all these, you know, they would keep all of these artisan craftsmen working. Well, after the revolution, there was no actual need for them, right? They weren't, you know, it's kind of like artists after the Catholic Church, you know? It's like, you know, well, who's paying the bill now? You know? And so you have all these people, you know, who are like, you know, well, okay, what are we going to do now, right? Well, okay, so he comes up with this project. They get to use the traditional processes and skills, and for several years, he's kept these people employed, you know, basically for full time. You know, he's been the lifeblood. This project has been the lifeblood of keeping that whole community, you know, economically viable. And that's what he was saying, is that through him making his art, it kind of has an effect, you know, because he's coming up with the idea. He's not making each of the sunflower seeds, right? But, you know, he's hiring, you know, people who, you know, the people to mine the material, the people to process the material, the people to actually do the little, you know, the molds, right? And pour them and then fire them, right? And then the people to actually, after they're fired, you know, little fired pieces of porcelain, to sit and hand paint them. And then they have to go back into the kiln again to be fired again to make, you know, the glaze permanent, right? And then they have to be, you know, sorted out and everything else. And then, you know, packed up and shipped all the way to England, right? That required a lot of people. And you see, he kept all these people at work, you know, just by that one thing. It had a huge influence on a lot of people's lives. You know, we would say a positive influence, you know, because, you know, they were able to practice their skills and, you know, make something and make a living at the same time, raise their families, you know. pay their electric bill, or, you know, whatever they have to do, right? So you see, art can be used, you know, in a lot of different ways. And, you know, particularly when you're talking about conceptual art or public art pieces in particular, you know, it's not necessarily the artist standing there, you know, next to a wall painting a mural, okay?
Right.
Because very seldom does, you know, one artist sit there and paint the whole mural. You know, really, when you get into public art projects, you know, you have the idea for the mural, but then you have a whole crew and group of engineers, craftsmen, you know, and everybody else involved in the project to accomplish it and to get it installed and to get it put in place. And so you see, it has an economic impact. It's a ripple effect, you know, into the community. Yeah.
I just didn't understand the process. I couldn't figure out what they were, how they did the seeds. They put it in something and
Yeah, it was a mold. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I got it. But it's just like if I'm a farmer and I plant vegetables like onions and all to make paint. You could go through a town to do that.
Yeah.
That to produce that and make handmade paints again.
Yeah.
I mean, you could use a lot of projects. I just didn't understand the process that was with the porcelain and how the seeds that they baked it inside the porcelain.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I didn't understand. But they that made the molds out of it. So that dawned finally. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Well, we all got confused with that.
Okay. Well.
Question.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
So initially, when they were mining the stones are ground into powder, and that's what the plate, a porcelain plate is made of.
Right.
It's made of powder. It's been poured into a mold and then painted and fired and all that 30-stage process.
Yeah, it's poured into a mold, and then after it sets up in the mold, you take it out of the mold, you clean up the edges and everything, and then you put it into a kiln, and it has to be fired, right? And then after it's fired, then you get, you know, an actual porcelain plate. But very seldom do you get a white porcelain plate with nothing on it, right? They usually put some kind of decorative motif or something on it, right? So that requires a different set of artisans, you know, somebody hand paint the glazes onto that plate, and then it has to go back into the kiln again to be fired.
Yeah.
Not only once, but twice.
Right.
See, because it has to have the color, but then it has to have a protective, clear coated glaze over it. You know. So,
Thank you, Charles. I have a much greater appreciation for plates.
you know, it's kind of like we were talking about chairs. You know, you know, it didn't just happen. You know, there's a process to it. Everything, and see, that's the thing. You know, that maybe I'm trying to make you aware of. Sitting right there where you are, if you just look around the room, there is nothing in that room that an artist has not touched or made a decision about. Somebody got paid to make a decision about that. Or, you know, many people got paid. The clothes you're wearing, the shoes you're wearing, you know, the glasses and cups and things, you know, you
designed it.
Yeah, the lamp, the bedspread, you know, everything around you. Some artist got paid to make a decision about that. Okay. Now, here's an interesting little tidbit for you. Okay. There is a group, okay, and it's called the American Arts Council. Okay. They did a economic impact survey of just the Atlanta metro region. What's the largest employer and what has the greatest economic impact, you know, in the Atlanta area?
Largest employer in Atlanta area?
Yeah. Yeah, who brings more money into the Atlanta metro area than any other industry.
The movie industry.
Well, that's part of it. But actually,
What they call art, all of the art industries.
that's right. Yeah. 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 Probably with 60% of all the money generated within the Atlanta metro area is connected to the art community. You know, theaters, music, film, visual arts, you know, industrial arts. I mean, graphic arts, advertising, you know, book publishing, you know, it goes on and on and on. It's a huge part of the economy that people don't even think about.
Realize.
If you're not into that, you would say Atlanta didn't have anything that draws people here because we don't have a riverfront and we don't have those kind of natural kind of things that would bring masses of people here. So the art, really among the art, what attracts people to Atlanta, the art.
Yeah.
So
well, the whole music industry, movie industry, but also the you know, World Congress Center. You know, I mean, you've got what 4 or 5 different venues within the metro area that hold huge national, international, and regional conferences, right? Every one of those, you know, every one of those companies coming to those conferences have to use, you know, designers, graphic designers, things like that to put their trade show displays and things together, right? There are companies just here in the Atlanta area that do nothing but that, okay? You know, I've done work for a lot of them, and, you know, it's something that nobody ever thinks about. But, you know, designing, you know, a 12 by 12 foot space in a trade show, you know, with all the graphic signage, you know, a lot of these are housed within structures, you know, that have to be engineered and put together, right, and manufactured. So, yeah, you know, plus
I would think hospitality tags onto that too, then, to the short tails.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's endless, you know. But yeah, it's part of the economy locally, but not only locally, really, you know, nationally and worldwide. You know, it really has a huge impact that people never even think about. So,
Charles, what do you think that he did with the pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds after his exhibit was over, after he did his conceptual art display?
well, the Tate in London, I believe, still has, you know, that display will be on
Permanently.
display permanently. That was a permanent piece of you know, that was a permanent piece of installation art.
Well, was also the thought made that they could sell some of these pieces, that the smaller pieces that the people would make in their sales room in the museum? They always have a place to sell.
Sunflower seeds?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. You know, at some point, you know that, you know, people, you know, a lot of those may end up at Sotheby's and auctioned off. You know,
about a dozen of sunflower seeds for sale.
Yeah, yeah. You know, hey, look, I'm sure that there's some, you know, some decorator or some woman in the Hamptons that wants to fill one of her glass, you know, display, you know, table settings with sunflower seeds, flowers stuck in it, or seashells or something, right? I'm sure there's somebody out there, you know.
Yeah. Can we make that at the center? You used to do have sculpture classes,
right?
Charles, can we make that at the center? Do we have an oven at the center?
Yeah, we have kilns. Yeah. I ran the kiln all the time.
Oh,
yeah. Well, we all go there and we made millions of things. And somebody come up with a figure or something.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know how many of you remember this, but we were actually working on a ceramic mural at the time when we closed the center.
Yeah.
I was a part of that. That was a lot of fun.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So all those individual pieces, you know, had to be worked just like those sunflower seeds, right? And then fired and killed. And we've got, you know, we're probably only about, you know, 1/10 of the way through making them.
Wow.
You know, because I mean, literally, it was going to take thousands of individual pieces of clay that had to be hand shaped and designed and molded and hand painted and glazed and fired and then installed to make that final piece. And so the whole idea in doing that was that it was, in fact, a community project. You know, it was, you know, I mean, I did the drawings and the designs for it, but then individual people were making individual pieces for it. So. Yeah.
I never heard about it. So, you know, when I went there, but they didn't tell the little man what you were doing.
Well, I actually went around to just about all the classes and tried to make people aware of it. And we were always asking for volunteers to come in on Thursday afternoons to take a little bit of time. You know, we had about a 3 to 4 hour period a week, you know, that we had the studio open that people could come in.
I never knew that.
And sit down.
Gene, you're invited now for the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. If we ever get back and get it open, you know, and go back to that.
We're going to invite Gene to participate.
Yeah, we'd like to finish it. So.
And Claudia and Veronica, we're going to invite everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I worked on it with Charles and the other artists.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today. I hope that it got you to thinking about a few things.
Very interesting.
Oh yeah, it was a good day.
Okay.
Yeah.
As all, every day's a good day.
Yeah.
The art.
All right.
So tomorrow.
May I read this quote by Mr. Wei Wei?
Yeah.
He says, this was from 2 years ago. He says, we have to stay strong. We have to believe art always wins.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There you go.
Pretty cool.
And on that happy note, I will see you tomorrow. But if you're working on something, even doing little scratches and scribbles and stuff like that, send them in. Let's talk about it. Let's see what you're doing, okay?
All right. See you tomorrow.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.